Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast. Hi everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio for this really exciting special one-off show on embedding sustainability in primary education. We're going to be looking at how schools can build, pupils' understanding of sustainability through curriculum, through school culture, and thinking a little bit about how to prepare them to think critically about their role in the world once they leave school. Obviously, we're going to be having a primary focus for the next hour or so, which is great. And I am joined by my host, Nathan Ginn. Say hi, Nathan.
Hello, Tom. Pleasure to be here. Something really excited to talk about, actually, for myself, for the children I work with, and also for my own children at home as well. Really interesting topic.
Brilliant. And we also have Caroline and Adam from Kapow Primary. And before we ask Caroline and Adam to properly introduce themselves, please say hello, Caroline and Adam, to everyone.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us.
Brilliant. I could hear the excitement. That's a brilliant hello. Nath, I don't know whether you want to sort of kick off the conversation a little bit, just from your perspective on why you wanted to co-host this show.
There's so much going on, I think, in there's two parts to it. There's so much going on in the curriculum at the moment, and and how we make that work and make it part of our school for us and our young people. But also there's a lot of change in the world, I think, and a lot of things for people to get their heads around. And I think there's something about starting younger. There's something about understanding, and I really like you said something about thinking critically about their role in the world, which I find really interesting as well. So a lot to unpick.
Amazing. So Caroline and Adam, our special guests this evening. Can you tell us each individually a little bit about yourselves and maybe a little bit as well about Kapow Primary?
So hi, I'll go first. I'm Caroline. I was a primary school teacher for 15 years, both in the state and the private sector. And I now work as the head of curriculum design at Kapow Primary. For those listeners who don't know, Kapow Primary really aims to support teachers in delivering the foundation subjects. And we do that by providing curriculum planning, lesson plans, and also CPD videos. And as the head of curriculum design, we work with all of our subject experts to help achieve that, make sure that people feel more confident in teaching those subjects that you sometimes don't feel expert at in the primary classroom when there's so many that you're having to lead on.
Yeah, and I'm Adam Sumner. I am also part of the curriculum team at Kapow. And yeah, I've been here for 3 years now, and before that I was in teaching for 10 years. SLT, STEM, sort of in STEM interest, which became maths a lot by the end of it. But my background is science and design and technology, and and I've got a real outside interest in sustainability as well, which is what we're talking about today. But expertise in curriculum design is why we're here.
Yeah, you'll notice that we didn't say we had expertise in sustainability, especially. We do have an interest, and we've done lots of reading around it, but our expertise is in curriculum design. We really look at what knowledge and skills should be taught in different subjects, making sure that's sequenced and structured effectively. And we really passionately believe that sustainability and climate education deserve that same careful thinking and planning that we give to the other subjects, and that's necessary for it to be taught meaningfully.
Brilliant. I just wanted to remind everybody out there, of course, we are live right now. So if you're picking this up on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, drop us a comment, say hi, say where you're listening from, where you are in the world, of course. And if you have any comments during the show this evening, while we're live, any questions, any comments, any thoughts, then definitely share them in the chat on whatever platform you happen to be engaging on, and we'll try our very best to include them in the show.
Can I start off, Tom, with like the biggest question of all, if that's
Please do.
Right. So, and I think it's a pertinent one, but, I want to ask Caroline and Adam, we're talking about sustainability, but why is now the time to talk about sustainability in school? Why is it important to us at the moment?
Well, I think it's the fact that it's so globally important at the moment. You've got countries across the world grappling with complex challenges to do with climate change, biodiversity loss, resource depletion, general environmental degradation, these things that are now sort of encroaching on that day-to-day news, that daily diet of news that we all get, and which inevitably our children get as well. And there are a number of different phrases and things that get thrown around quite sort of like carelessly, and we expect people to fully understand what they mean. Things like sustainably sourced or made from sustainable materials, and actually those things don't always mean exactly what they say. And actually navigating what's real, maybe navigating or creating my own opinion perhaps amongst those things that are flying at me at all times, it's difficult as an adult. And I can't imagine what that's like as a child when you're being fed these things day to day. And you've got sort of like the faces of this, people like Greta Thunberg or perhaps David Attenborough, if we're going back to some of those things that we see on perhaps the BBC. And actually there's loads of stuff for children to hook into and to grab onto, but they won't fully understand everything. And all of these things are quite easily absorbed, but not always easily understood. And I think that's why we feel it's particularly important. But I mean, Nathan, you talked about it a little bit at the top of the show with the idea of curriculum, and there is a curriculum review going on at the moment. And we've seen this interim stage where this idea of global and social change is quite high on the agenda, addressing that in whatever new curriculum we get. The sort of like tackling rapid social and environmental and technological change that sort of like is always sort of like important, but not necessarily addressed at the moment.
I think as well, there is the curriculum change coming, but there is an expectation on schools now to be providing climate change education. The sustainability leadership and climate action plans that schools are expected to have ready this year do state that they should be covering 4 areas. And one of those is climate education and green careers, and providing a knowledge-rich and comprehensive teaching about climate change and supporting staff to do that. So, that documentation is already out there, even though the new curriculum isn't. So I think schools are, feeling that they need to be doing something already.
Yeah, and it's part of that as well, is that even though not all the things on that climate action plan are supposed to be child facing, there's things there that are to do with, school management and things like that. It does say that it should involve learners. So the things that you're doing, even if you're trying to improve biodiversity on site, you should be involving your children when you're doing it. So actually, this is why we think it's important at the moment.
There is one of the things that I will say that I have massively loved seeing over, I think it's about 20 years I've been in education now, is that involvement of the learners at all levels across schools. I do find that such a powerful thing that we've moved from. It might have been there when I started teaching, but certainly seeing it come through is really powerful. And I wanted to pick up on another thing you said there. Hopefully we'll get into maybe in more detail, is about these, the phrases and the understanding and the vocabulary we might call it. And I say to Tom, I went deep down a rabbit hole, Tom, around dog poo bags, because it turns out that degradable and biodegradable and these are not the same things that you might think. And actually, you know, where I'd thought I'd bought eco-friendly ones that were degradable, that just meant that the plastic broke down. You know, and would you know, Tom, the difference between biodegradable, degradable, compostable dog plastic bags?
Oh no! Come on now, come on!
Well,
It's too early to ask me that.
Well, no, but as I say, I think you know, Adam's got something there, that there is a barrier, and most people think that these things are important. Most people would want to make a choice, like I was making with my shopping at that point, and I went down a rabbit hole with it. But you know, Caroline and Adam, you know, that's one barrier, I guess, is that understanding the complexity of the words. But what else is getting in the way of, you know, schools really embracing this and taking it on board?
I mean, I think as with many things, time is probably the biggest barrier, and that's, you know, from two sides. The fact that the actual timetable of what we're teaching our children is absolutely crammed full, as anybody who's worked in primary schools will know, and any time, you know, something like this, however important you may feel it is brought in, there is always a bit of a feeling amongst staff as to, well, when are we going to fit this in? How are we going to do that? You know, we've still got to teach the kind of 13 subjects that we have to, and there's no extra time really to do this. So I think time is the biggest barrier, and again, time in terms of the school being able to develop a whole school approach, teachers, you know, different subject leaders in primary being able to work together to develop that, to fully understand it, and everybody, you know, make those kind of decisions about, well, you know, what is it that we're going to teach and when are we going to teach it? I think, you know, is really necessary, and time is not something that primary school teachers have to spare. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier. I think also the fact that at the moment, like I just said, it is sort of expected that schools are now starting to teach this, and that would be part of their sustainability and climate action plans. But there isn't really any guidance as to what they should be teaching. And I think that makes it really difficult to know, you know, well, how deep do we go into it? And then kind of coupled with that, there is a bit of a fear, I think, when teaching about climate change, that there are sort of sensitive subjects. You might upset children. You know, you might have them kind of go home and you know, say stuff to parents that parents aren't that happy that they've, you know, been learning perhaps about the impact of the meat industry in school or whatever. So, and I think that those are two sides of the same coin, that there being a lack of guidance and the teachers feeling a bit underconfident because they're worried they're going to say something a bit wrong, or that they don't know how far to go with it. So I think they're the kind of main barriers, I would say, for teaching in school. And I think sometimes even when schools want to teach these things well, they just can feel like they're not sure where to start, really.
Yeah, I mean, you know, both of you are teachers with, you know, or have been teachers with vast experience there. And it always, you know, I think people forget when coming to plan something, there's not just the time it takes to plan a scheme work. And I've made this mistake myself as a leader. You know, there's the time to plan what you're going to do if you already know it really well, but the research time on that it takes you to unpick, actually, what do I want to teach? Is that the right thing to teach? All of those questions, it you know, sometimes can feel like a massively overwhelming and daunting thing, which certainly, you know, I think I've felt at times when it comes to it.
Yeah, and I think normally you know, at least you've got your national curriculum kind of end goals for the end of Key Stage 1 and the end of Key Stage 6, the end of Key Stage 2 to guide you, and you don't have those, so it's even more daunting.
Yeah, you know, I can imagine it. You know, there will be some people who are, you know, sort of turning around and saying, so please, you know, is there something that can help me here? Is there a little bit of guidance? As you say, there's information out there, maybe not what we would term as, particularly when it comes to other subjects like your maths, like your English, where there's really clear guidance and steps of what to do. Now, I'm interested, Caroline, you said something there about, the teachers, the parents being reluctant, maybe their fear of not knowing. I'm not sure I've told you this, Tom, about why I put on a lot of weight recently, and it's because I accidentally scared my oldest child. We did that thing that typically you would do, and we said, you've got to eat all your food because, there are hungry people elsewhere in the world. Yeah. And I did this, as you do as a parent, not really thinking it through. And then he'd eaten every time now. He's eaten some of his food, and he says, "Have I eaten enough?" And I say, "Yeah, that's okay." And he'll say, "What about what's left?" And I'm kind of stuck there then, going, either I have to package it up or I have to eat it myself, which is what I normally do, because I've almost put this passion into him, which is great. I've put the passion in there, but now he's holding me to account as only a 7-year-old can. And I do worry, you talked about it a bit there about the upsetting, but also the repercussions of saying, plastic is bad to young people, and the kind of cans of worms that can understand. Do you think that's a factor in schools of, turning around to children and saying wasting paper is bad, and they turn around to you and say, hang on, what about all these sheets you've just printed off? Is there a worry there around what we're opening ourselves up to?
I think you're right. I think there absolutely is. In school, you do still have to use a certain amount of paper, and once you've kind of, you almost feel like you then need to practice what you've preached, don't you?
Absolutely.
And obviously part of embedding sustainability into school life is that teachers are leading the way and kind of practicing what they preach. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a little bit of a fear of, are we sort of setting them on a path that sometimes we can't control all of those things. Even as a teacher in school, you can't control everything about what's going on in school and whether it's sustainable. But I think it's giving them. Sorry, Adam, you keep trying to suggest. Go on, you go.
It's fine. It's just it's the sort of like, it's almost going back to what I was saying at the beginning, where we kind of form our own opinions on these things as well. And Nathan, you clearly got your sort of angle on this, and we've got ours, but not everybody thinks the same way. And without the guidance to back up what we're actually supposed to be teaching, you'll get some teachers that feel anxious about wanting to tell children about wasting paper, about eating all their food when they're in the dinner hall, and what the repercussions of that are. But it starts to become opinion without the guidance, and then we sort of risk part 2 of the teacher standards, because we're sort of like, we're worried about those things becoming our own opinion rather than an actual, like, what's fact and what's not. And there's got to be anxiety around that as well, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't until sort of, really thinking about this with you guys that I thought about other subjects and where they go, and even things like PSHE, where there are, some more of the controversial kind of things that parents might have questions around, those aspects that we teach young people about life and relationships. There's a lot of guidance for a lot of those aspects of the curriculum. Whereas I started looking here and going, actually, what if there are parents who want to challenge what I'm saying on climate change, for example, which we know in some parts of the world might be more controversial than it probably is here. But there might be people who want to challenge me on that. And do I have something that I can back it up with? And
you lean on that guidance, don't you? With RSE and PSHE, if a parent says, well, why are you teaching this? You kind of crack it out and say, well, here's the statutory guidance, and it does say that they need to be taught this, and that's why we're teaching it. I mean, I think with sustainability and climate change, it's about having a plan in school as to, well, what are we going to teach? And just in the same way that you're publishing curriculums for your other subjects, if you can publish, on your website as well, what you're teaching, it's that kind of number one rule, I think, of dealing with parents in teaching, isn't it? Is that you kind of tell them first.
Yeah.
It's like when a child's, done something wrong, and you've had to put a consequence in place in the day, and you ring the parent and let them know before the child does. And I feel like it's that same kind of thing, that if you're very clear as to what you're teaching in a school, and have got that written down and published, on your website alongside your geography curriculum, alongside your history curriculum, alongside your RSE curriculum, then, it's there. Parents can go and look at it and, raise queries, hopefully not in the moment, because you've published it and shared it with them.
And I think as a teacher, for me as well, that it gives me kind of a confidence. Maybe that's a security, maybe is a better word for it. But, of knowing actually, this lesson that I'm going to deliver is on the website. Parents have looked at, maybe not the whole lesson, but they've looked at what the objectives are. They're clear on where this is going, and they're clear on how it ties into what we're doing and our ethos as a school, or our learning journeys that we're trying to move the students through. And that as a teacher, I think would give me a lot more sort of confidence and security, and maybe settle any nerves I had.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Kapow Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to kapowprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Because it was interesting you said about, earlier on, about there being so many, having to be a subject expert at primary in everything. And when I talk to my secondary colleagues about, what it's like to be a primary teacher, and they're like, oh, right, so, I'm a maths teacher, I'm a geography teacher. What kind of teacher are you? I'm kind of like, depending on what time or what school I'm at, I've been a this teacher, I've been a that teacher, but really you're an everything teacher. And it's really hard to be an expert in everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and lots of the recent surveys and things. Teach the Future did a survey in 2021, and they said 70% of teachers said that they haven't received adequate training to educate students on climate change. So lack of confidence to teach it is kind of high up there with one of the the kind of main barriers, I think. And like you say, when we were working on this for Kapow Primary, where we started was saying, well, okay, fine, they've not, there's no given endpoints, but actually let's sit down and think, well, what do we think feels appropriate to be endpoints? And we came up with, I think, 9 or 10, something like that we said, actually, these feel appropriate to us to be primary school end goals. And then we, just like we would with any other subject when we're designing the curriculum, we said, well, let's build a progression of knowledge and skills then. How are we going to get children towards those endpoints? And, how's that learning going to build over time and be really meaningful? And like you say, that's got a kind of double whammy in that, number one, you're making sure that the learning is meaningful and that each year they're building on what came before. But number two, making the teachers feel confident that actually they're teaching at the kind of age appropriate level for their year group, that they know what they're covering and what's coming later as well. So I think it does help teachers to have that confidence.
Yeah. Sorry, go.
I'll jump in there. Sorry, you mentioned age appropriate, and I'm because there's a worry for me, I think, when approaching, some of this is a bit like we mentioned the RSE and those kind of things. It's in primary school, it's the start of a very big journey that can go to some quite scary places, I guess. If we follow logically through some of the sustainability issues that we might be facing as a world, and some of the problems and challenges that the young people in our classes at the moment might be asked to overcome when they're adults, or certainly voting. So hopefully some of them will go on to make a real difference in the world. But how do we manage that, age appropriateness without, I guess, overloading them, without scaring them, without sending them home with, too many questions or nightmares at worst?
Well, it is tricky because there isn't that sort of official guidance there. We wanted to keep everything as close to the current national curriculum as possible, and we took leads from the subjects where there is that extra bit of guidance that we know is related to sustainability. And we sort of established some key areas that we wanted to teach in sustainability, and then looked at the subjects that could help us to sort of build the progression of knowledge there. So things like science, because we've got an interdependence key area and an appreciation for nature key area, because we're working at that, foundational early knowledge and skills in terms of sustainability. We don't want to stray too far from what they're being taught already. And within science, you've got the foundations for understanding what biodiversity is already, even though the word biodiversity isn't in that national curriculum currently. It is on your climate action plan and your climate and sustainability action plan, and the children are supposed to be involved in that. But it is there. It's just not explicitly biodiversity, because they are being taught about different types of animal groups in year 1 and then in year 2, and different types of habitats in year 2. And then in year 4, they're starting to piece together the sort of like that information of human impact that's in the non-stat guidance there in year 4, like the positives effects that humans can have and the negative effects. And it doesn't say sustainable management of nature reserves.
They learn about needs of plants and animals in Key Stage 1, don't they? And then
That's
in year
it.
6, the adaptation and evolution unit, I think they learn, what happens if animals or plants' needs aren't met over time. So, all of that links, doesn't it?
It does, and it's those little tweaks that you can then make on top of that learning, just to sort of provide that sustainable angle to it. Sort of like we would expect, if you're learning about food chains in year 2, and you're looking at your simple food chain of a plant, a snail, and a song thrush, and we expect them to start thinking about cause and effect relationships when they're reading. So, why did that person say this? So my question becomes, what happens if I remove the snails? And all I want is a simple cause and effect response, but actually it's really, really powerful, and it just tweaks that learning to give it that steer towards sustainability. And then they've got that knock-on effect of later on finding how that links with biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity. So we're using what's there.
Yeah. So I think when we kind of came up with those endpoints, they weren't like randomly plucked from the air. They were very much looking at, well, what's already kind of, what can we glean from what is in the national curriculum? And I think lots of people have looked at the national curriculum, and we know there was a big kind of outcry when the 2014 national curriculum came out, that they'd almost like scaled back the mention of sustainability and climate change. And it's not, those things aren't explicitly mentioned, but there are lots of opportunities, certainly within the science and geography curriculum, to make them part of other things that are on the national curriculum. It's not that too far a stretch to do that.
No, and I think it's important for us to say at this point, though, that we aren't only using the science curriculum and the geography curriculum, because then you risk sort of teaching your sustainability in isolation. What we did was use them to help us gauge that age appropriate level for our progression knowledge and skills statements. But once we then got that, we can then embed it throughout arts and languages and music and as well, because we've pitched it correctly. That's why.
I think one thing that really helped us as well actually was doing we did a progression of vocabulary alongside, didn't we, our kind of progression of knowledge and skills, and that was really useful because lots of things, like I've used the term carbon footprint in primary school lessons. In fact, I've used it with like year 3 and 4. And when we were doing it, we said, actually, like, they don't really have an understanding of what carbon is. And they're not really going to get that understanding until secondary level. So should we have this in here? Like, maybe we shouldn't. And, it made us think about all those words that we kind of automatically use, like you're saying about the poo bags.
Biodegradable.
I didn't expect to mention poo bags on the podcast, but, that we use those words sometimes with children. We're just making an assumption that they know what they mean. And I think it's really important to think, actually, are we explicitly teaching them these, or are they appropriate for that age, and do that thinking? And I think unless you really plan out a sort of curriculum, you don't do that thinking necessarily.
That's right. We don't want anything to be incidental. It's all got to be purposeful, and you risk that when you just throw around the terms that you've heard from the news, from the person down the road that's got a real interest in it. And actually that's where a lot of it is, and we want to sort of like make it more meaningful and more purposeful than that.
You had me at the kind of progressive element of this as an idea, and I feel so strongly about that, having done some work on curriculum design, that you've taken the time to really pitch that, because I've seen sustainability kind of projects or topics or things done in school where they kind of hit a bit flat because they don't seem to get increasingly more complex as they go up through the school, and it sounds like that. But you had me sold there. But if you're going to tell me that the vocab has already been thought out for me as well, I think you'll have bowled me over. But that work's been done for me as well, has it?
Yeah, we've had painstakingly long conversations about the word biodegradable, in fact, and whether we needed it, and how closely we can link it to rocks and soils in science, and what's already happening there. So yeah, we've done that thinking.
Well, sorry, go on, Caroline.
I was going to jump in at this point and just say thank you to all the people listening live. We've had 250 live listeners so far who've jumped in to the show. So thank you for joining us. If you're watching us live, of course, on X or YouTube or anywhere else, then feel free to drop us a comment. Just say where you're listening in from or what you're doing. We also had a comment from Paul at the beginning, from Paul Foz, who was asking about the benefits of Kapow. And I know that Daisy has replied, and just going to put Daisy's reply on screen so we can all see it. Obviously Daisy has said that Kapow provides engaging, knowledge-rich and progressive curriculums and lesson plans for all the foundation subjects. And the biggest USP is that Kapow are committed in upskilling teachers rather than becoming a press and play option. And they've got 5,000 lessons alongside over 1,500 bite-sized CPD videos, and there is a no obligation free trial to go with it, which is available at the link on screen. So thanks for the question, Paul, and thanks Daisy for the response as well. Back to you, Nave.
I wanted to maybe take a different tangent, if that's all right, and just ask about individual and collective responsibility. And it's one of your key areas, but why do you feel that's so important to be built in?
This was one that when we came to put the key areas together, we felt that some of them were quite obviously what we wanted in there, things like resources and waste and climate change and appreciation for nature and interdependence, because we knew that these things were so rooted within what sustainability is. And with individual and collective responsibility, it's kind of in response to we read a report from the NAEE, the National Association for Environmental Education. It was about engaging the next generation, and that individual and collective responsibility key area is there to sort of like provide guidance and progressive statements so that children can really build their understanding of how to actually help. So you get your want to help from your appreciation for nature, because you build your love of the world around you and you come to understand it better through your interdependence. But then how do you actually do it? What do I do? Do I just turn off lights or what? You know, the idea is to then sort of build that progressively as well. And we sort of used a broadening horizons approach where children would start with themselves and then expand outwards and sort of into the school and then local communities and then into looking at the global problem as well, and sort of providing statements that you can use across subjects to sort of help with some of the activities that you're planning. So to sort of like establish realistic boundaries and expectations of what they can actually do. And the idea is to empower them, to
give them a bit of hope as well. We don't want it all to be doom and gloom. We know there's a lot of climate anxiety amongst pupils. I think we've got a quote somewhere, haven't we, that I think that 90%,
yeah.
90% of students said climate change impacted their mental health in the preceding 4 weeks, which is huge, isn't it?
And I've got a really nice anecdote that I'm desperate to tell because I really enjoyed it. So this is a little bit anecdotal. I went to the Geography Association conference back in April, and I singled out a particular lecture that I wanted to go to from a PhD research project. So and her name was Roos van der Aar, and it was about climate anxiety. So it was Dutch primary school children's feelings on the climate crisis. And what she'd done was created this project where it was a draw, write, tell. So children were asked to draw what the future looked like, thinking about climate change as well. And as you'd expect, most of them drew robots. So like cities filled with robots helping them, sometimes robots that weren't helping and doing incredible things as well.
Might be a bit close to the bone at the moment.
But what lots of them drew was water everywhere. And what she'd done is establish this method of like ranking the drawings and then the comments that the children then made afterwards. And she was then able to establish how they kind of felt from each drawing, how they felt about climate anxiety or how their feelings towards the future, basically. And for the most part, it was kind of indifference. They just heard future and drew robots for the most part. But lots of them drawing water meant that it's come from somewhere, hasn't it? They've got this idea that in the future, there's going to be more water everywhere. And lots of them felt indifferent. And what she'd established was that they felt that these things like sustainable existence and climate change were distant problems, things that were already done, that they could do nothing about. And what we want, one of our big goals with this is to try and embed this across the curriculum, is so that children don't feel helpless, because when they've got that agency and that empowerment, they're going to want to do things differently and going to want to be that generation that makes the change for the positive, because we're in that process at the moment and they can really carry it on. But it was really interesting. It was a really interesting lecture, and I really enjoyed it. I took a lot from it, so much so that I'm desperate to talk about it now.
It's got me singing Whitney Houston in my head. Children of the future.
Oh, right.
It had me singing Busted, and it'd been to the year 3000.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Not much has changed, but we lived underwater. But one of the things that I take away from that story, which I think is really powerful, it really gets it. Maybe we don't listen to the children or talk to them about some of the deeper stuff that they might be thinking, but there is, we talked about that individual, the collective, but I think this is an area where you can feel a little bit helpless, where, I spend a lot of time at the beach, it's where I live, and I clean the beaches, but I take my two young children there who are 6 and 7, And some days it can feel, depressing. It can feel, like I'm not making a difference because I am one person doing a thing there with them, and we're picking up a bit of litter, but you look 100 meters down the beach, there's even more litter. And, it can feel like this is one of those things where we can all do little things, but to everyone do something seems like such a big challenge. So it can feel a bit overwhelming, I guess. Do we need to worry about that with the young people?
I think the idea then is that we want to get more of them to understand, because that's right. If we keep it just as our own personal projects, the things that we do. So I go out to the beach and I pick up litter, but actually that does still feel overwhelming because there's loads of litter and it comes back each day, and I can't do it all on my own. So the idea of the individual and collective responsibility side of things is to sort of put in that message that we don't just keep it to ourselves. We don't just make the change ourselves. We go and tell people about it, and we go into our community and we try and get other people on board. And the more of us that are on board, the easier it becomes. And that's part of that, what came out of that NAE report quite clearly, that we are very good at telling children to do things themselves, like don't buy that plastic, the drink in the plastic bottle, because I can easily do that. But it's convincing everybody else that.
And that's why we wanted that key area in our progression, because we were like, actually, you can teach them all this stuff, but if we don't kind of teach them, that you do need to involve others to make a change, then it can make them feel more anxious, overwhelmed, helpless. Right. So it's giving them those tools, isn't it?
So I think the worry is there, Nathan. I think you're right, but actually that's what we've thought about. We tried to think, well, what's the next step after they've learned that they need to be responsible individually? It's then once you get to lower key stage 2 and then upper key stage 2, actually I need to think more than just myself, and that's the idea, to help them do that.
And I think at the start of the podcast, I maybe put out there that something that I need to take back around. I said that I would have a fear about the young people holding me to account, whereas now hearing you talk about it, actually I think if my year 6s came to me and said, Mr. Ginn, we're worried about your use of photocopying, or we think that the school should look at doing this instead, or we'd like to organize a walking bus to school. Actually, those are things that I would feel really proud of, actually, not scared of. The agency for the children, or them taking that on board and showing those are really incredible skills.
They are, and that's what I think. After all, the actual understanding of what it is, which is what we can start to build in primary school, and what the problems are, it's the what can I do, and that's key. It's really, really key.
I wanted to ask a bit about, and this is maybe like a pivot on how we've been talking. We've been talking about what goes really well and how those, but at the moment, there are people struggling with getting these things in to their curriculum, and without those clearly defined endpoints and progression steps. So what is sustainability, or from talking to other teachers when you're going through this, what do you think it currently looks like in schools at the moment?
I mean, I think there's definitely lots of brilliant teachers doing lots of wonderful things in their classroom, and we wouldn't want to take away from that. There's loads of fantastic practice going on. I think it's just making sure that everything that is being done is kind of meaningful, and in the same way that we would think, for planning out a history curriculum, well, how does it build? We do that same thing, because when we don't do that, there's a bit of a danger of kind of repetition happening, teachers all teaching the same kind of aspect of sustainability, and not other aspects. I think lots of schools well, certainly from my experience with things like this, tend to just sort of put a box on the medium term plan, like think about sustainability, and everybody's going, oh, well, how can we get sustainability in here? And it's quite disjointed then, of benefit and better than not doing it at all. But I think it needs to tie together a little bit more. We already talked about vocabulary, and there is a danger if everybody's just sort of deciding what sustainability might go in a particular lesson or in a particular unit with no guidance, no progression to work from, that year sixes are doing something that's simpler than year threes are doing. And so I think there's loads of good stuff going on, but it's just maybe a bit random at times.
Yeah, and it becomes those like loose facts, and it's similar to how they're drawing the information from the outside world as well, where it's less purposeful, and it's sort of, they're able to then regurgitate some things, but they're not sort of actually maintaining and retaining that information, and there isn't that sense of agency that we were just talking about as well.
Yeah.
I've certainly been there myself. I think, I recognize a lot when you said the word repetition. I think it flashed up memories for me of when I haven't had that support, in place. And I can't remember which year groups it was, but we found out that we as school leaders, we'd made that mistake. We hadn't supported our teachers enough, and we put a box on a medium-term plan to say, do something. And we found out that actually two separate year groups, I think a couple of years apart, had ended up doing the same project, and without much difference there, because we hadn't given the teachers the guidance. It had been a bolt-on kind of thing that we maybe hadn't valued as much as we should have done, and it certainly hadn't been interweaved or embedded into the curriculum in the way that you're describing. It had been a bit flat. So it'd been there, and it great intentions, and we could say we've done something, but it hadn't felt the same as when we talk about teaching in maths or teaching in English or teaching in science.
We've made such kind of strides with building curriculums, and over the past few years, haven't we? Because I think sometimes history lessons used to be a bit like that, didn't they? When I started teaching, we'd go, oh, we're doing the Romans, and we'd just do random stuff about Romans. And another year group would do random stuff about Vikings, and you weren't thinking, well, how are we really building these skills? And so I think we've made so much progress.
Caroline, don't talk about my lessons. All right, don't.
I think we've made so much progress in terms of really thinking, well, what's going in the curriculum? How are we structuring it? How does it build? And it just makes sense to us. And I know this is partly because we're curriculum designers by trade, but it just makes sense to us that we would do the same thing for sustainability. If that's how we do it well for other subjects, then why would we not do the same thing for sustainability?
Yeah.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Kapow Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to kapowprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
And when you talk about that, then I wanted to broaden that out from sometimes when we talk about curriculum, we can often think about inside the classroom, but and I don't want to put this on Tom as the secondary teacher here, but the primary curriculum is more than just the lessons inside. And so I wanted to ask you about, what role do the, routines, the events, clubs play in developing that whole school culture around sustainability?
I mean, I think all of those things do play a part. They're all, raising awareness amongst pupils and parents. Things like, loads of schools would have an eco club. And that obviously gives pupils with a keen interest a chance to kind of explore it further. Loads of my classroom, we used to have a light monitor to check the lights were going off, and someone to check the whiteboard goes off when you leave the room. So, that's kind of your daily routines. And I think things like that, awareness days, walk to school week, birthday, I think all these things are really, really beneficial, and I'm not calling for those things to stop at all. I think, they have a part to play. I think it's just that same feeling of, if this were another subject, would we be happy for it just to be, well, we do an awareness day, well, we've got a club, well, we've got a monitor who...
I've got my maths monitor, and I have one child who does maths each day, and that's it, just the one.
That wouldn't be enough, would it? We wouldn't deem that to be enough. So it's great. All those things are really important, and they definitely do engage pupils,
and they become more important once the sustainability progression is there. Once it's embedded, they become even more powerful. So they're definitely worthwhile. But it's just,
would you say, Adam, and Caroline, would you say that those activities are a lead into it, or would you say they are the sort of sugar coating on the top? Well, so an example that I experienced in a school I recently worked in, which worked really well, was litter picking, right? Which, all the students really enjoyed doing. I mean, I sometimes think in a general sense, the kids are better than the adults on this, full stop. But I just wondered what you saw the relationship as, one leading to the other.
Yes. Well, I think that it can be both, can't it? So if you've already established that sustainability is embedded throughout your school and you've got that ethos, then doing a litter pick becomes incredibly powerful because it's part of your school ethos, and you do that and it becomes almost a regular thing. Perhaps it's not a one-off, but if you're establishing it, so if you're developing that embedding of sustainability throughout your curriculum, it could be a really good starting point, couldn't it? Because you can then get that buy-in, because if the children do really, really enjoy it, you've got the buy-in afterwards to then say, well, this is how we're going to do things from this point on.
I think if you've got the progression in place as well, and you're doing the litter pick and you're sort of spending 5 minutes before or after the litter pick talking about, why is this important? The conversation that you're going to be having with your EYFS pupils versus your year 2 versus your year 4 versus your year 6 pupils should be different. It shouldn't be that you're having the exact same conversation about why litter picking is important. And if you've got that progression in place, you'd kind of know as a teacher what the knowledge and skills are for your phase, and be able to draw on those when you're talking about why we're doing the litter picking. And so then you've done a litter pick, and maybe everyone in the school's been involved in it, but it's progressive in the way that you're talking about what you're doing with the waste and why you're doing it. And therefore, immediately it's become more purposeful, as well as being a thing that raises awareness, and everybody's taking part and looking after the kind of school environment. And so I think for me, I would say you still would want the progression there, but those things could absolutely lead into it.
I think the thing that I take away, Tom, and this is a challenge. I don't know if you have light monitors, light switch monitors at your school, but for anyone listening who does have those monitors, is if you have them in year R all the way up to year 6, and I was to go into my school and I was to say to them, ask the monitor in year 1 and say, okay, why are you turning the lights off? And I was to ask the same question of the year 6. Now, in any other subject for me, now I think about it, I would expect those answers to become more complex, to be more thought through, more critical, thought out. Whereas I think in most places, and I hold my hands up to this myself, is the answer would be either not to waste electricity. I don't know if they'd go much deeper. And I think that's where maybe there's something that's been overlooked of that surface level things we've done for sustainability before, where we can say, actually, we have bins with paper and plastic, and we have those, and we have a light switch monitor, and we do that, and we haven't gone deeper into it, and we haven't. I don't know.
It's an opportunity, isn't it, to talk about it at a different level for different pupils. But again, I think we circle right back to the point we were discussing at the beginning, which is teachers don't have that guidance as to what level they should be discussing it at with. So you just understandably, I as a teacher just would do it sort of whatever came to mind in that moment, and it's
our
not
school
really
actually. Our school currently has so we teach in a temporary building because there's a new school being built, and they literally turn the power off. So there's no need for light monitors. It's literally like we're going to turn the power off for the whole school in 10 minutes. So like literally they power off.
Oh,
wow. There you go. I wanted to ask of Caroline and Adam, because I know we so much to talk about, and I'm really interested in the kind of complexities of it. But you mentioned a little bit about pulling on the science curriculum, pulling on the geography curriculum. Particularly, I'm a geographer myself at heart. But why is it important then to treat sustainability as that thing integrated across all of the curriculum, rather than having its own subject where I do it, 1 hour a fortnight?
But I think it's because it draws on so many different things, and it's that sort of the part it plays in the person that you are outside of the classroom as well. And I think that's the importance of it, because you're being taught these different subjects in isolation in some cases, and your art curriculum or your progression in art is different to your progression in geography, but actually having the threads that run through those subjects, linking them together, helps you anchor the learning in lots of different places and actually lots of different contexts for sustainability, rather than just being its own isolated subject. Allow you to do far more with it than other subjects as well. So I think it's incredibly important that it's embedded across, rather than
and we want them to be really thinking about sustainability in every aspect of their lives, don't we? We don't want it to be just sitting within a geography lesson and they leave that geography lesson and it's not relevant when they're not in geography anymore. And I think to make it become part of their kind of everyday mindset, it, like Adam's just said, it needs to come up in lots of different contexts. And certainly lots of the reading we did around creating our sustainability progression, and when we kind of had this idea for, well, we would like to have a progression and we would like to integrate it into our subject curriculums, lots of the stuff we looked at, just referring back to the NAE report about engaging the next generation as well, said, to make sure it's a holistic understanding of sustainability issues, it needs to be cross-curricular integration. And I think Teach the Future, the student-led campaign group, published a report with suggestions a couple of years ago for how the existing national curriculum could be adapted very slightly so that climate change was in all of the subject statements as well. So it's very much kind of considered that if we're going to do it properly, we shouldn't just be saying, well, it's covered in that subject. We should be... It
sort of transcends the subject disciplines, doesn't it? It's beyond that, because you want it to be about life rather than one day going, actually, I've done sustainability as a subject like I did maths and I don't really like it, so I'm not going to be interested in it. Actually, we just want it to permeate everything.
Which was a nice curriculum design challenge, actually. Like we've quite enjoyed that, because normally we're working in a particular subject discipline, and this is completely different, because we've created this progression that is not met through one subject. It's met through all of our foundation subjects, and some slightly more difficult than others, but things like art and music, obviously, you know, one of our key areas is that pupils will develop an appreciation of nature, and of course art and music often you know, is creatives, you know, reflecting on nature around them and appreciating it. So yeah, it does come into other subjects as well.
And I also think from that agency point of view for the young people, if I were, you know, if I think to myself, or a question for the teachers out there to go into school tomorrow and ask your young people, you know, who is going to save the world, not in a Superman type way, but when we think about Greta Thunberg, you know, she's not a scientist in that sense, you know, and actually in thinking about sustainability and the change we need to make, an artist, a great piece of art, a great piece of music could make the difference, or could be part of that factor of making people take collective responsibility for our world. And it's not just maybe the scientists who are going to do this. There's a part in understanding it, of course, but actually, you know, it could come from any area, this willingness to look after the environment.
Yeah, and of course, our pupils are going to go off into all different areas, aren't they? So, you know, we don't want people who aren't doing geography and science to go, well, sustainability is nothing to do with me then in my future career. So yeah, no, I think it's really important that it's integrated across the subjects. And yeah, I think one of the things that we're really proud of being able to do with you know, the fact that we offer all the foundation subjects at Kapow means that we've been able to take that progression and say, actually, if you teach our foundation subjects, you are covering this progression. So we're addressing that, integrating it across the curriculum, but also that time barrier that we talked about earlier, because you're not actually having to find time to do some extra sustainability lessons or an extra project in your school. You know, if you're teaching the foundation subjects, you are covering the sustainability progression.
Now, we you know, quickly coming towards the end, or using up the time. I've asked so many questions already, and you know, I want to make sure that there are you know, things for the listeners to take away. And so, you know, if you had a chance to sort of say one or two things to some of the teachers listening, or the leaders, school leaders listening, that they could take away from this, what would your thoughts be?
Well, I think the main one is that we don't want it to be an added extra. It's that embedding of it across the curriculum that's the real key to changing the culture and changing the ethos of the school, and ensuring that children have that agency. I think those are the things that we want.
Yeah,
really,
and I think, yes, you know, those other things that we said lots of schools are doing, you know, don't stop doing those things. You know, and that's fantastic, and it really does raise awareness, and it engages pupils. And, you know, by all means, have an Earth Day where you have a real focus on sustainability. But I think just making sure that it's really meaningful as well, and really purposeful is so important.
And if people want to take a little bit more of a look into Kapow, they can find you on your website.
Yes, yeah, you can get a free trial on Kapow, and you can access everything with a free trial. There's everything's unlocked, so you would be able to see the progression of sustainability that we've been talking about. You'd be able to see our sustainability collection, which is a series of lessons which help towards that progression, but that can be taught on a day such as Earth Day. So we've tried to provide for that as well, but just make it more purposeful. So yeah, do go and have a look.
And that's at kapowprimary.com. If you're looking for it, the link is there at the bottom of the screen at the moment. Tom, did you have any further questions?
Only to say, huge thanks to everybody who's tuned in. 400 live listeners tonight who've checked in on this. So thank you very much to everybody. And if you've only just joined, of course, in the last 5 minutes, don't worry, fear not, because this will be available as a podcast probably tomorrow. So if you follow Teachers Talk Radio on your favored podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever it is, this one's going to be available to listen back to tomorrow. So my final thoughts are I've learned a lot, not only about sustainability, but about how to embed it into the curriculum, how to involve learners in it, how to think about it with regards to subject specific areas. Basically how we can do it all better. So thank you. Huge thanks.
Do you know, for me, Tom, the key takeaway has been just this time to talk about something that I think I'd overlooked somehow. You know, I've done this for maths, I've done it for science. You know, I was thinking about it, and I don't know how I've had this blind spot where I wasn't thinking about progression, where I wasn't thinking about embedding it across every subject for this one area as well.
Sure.
That makes me so happy. I'm literally grinning at you saying that, because that's what we really wanted to achieve with it. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about it.
Nice, brilliant. Listen, we'll be back soon on TTR. In the meantime, as Nathan has pointed out, definitely go check out Kapow Primary, kapowprimary.com. Check them out in the meantime. Keep checking in with TTR, of course. We've got loads more shows to come this week. Caroline and Adam, have a wonderful evening, and we'll speak to you again. And cheers for this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Nath, as well.
Bye.
Bye, all.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.